right-hand corner. How's that?
Oh, that took me down.
No, you're up here.
Oh, okay. That's great. You filled my screen.
Here we go. Okay. Call me if you need me.
Okay, thank you, Patty.
I think we're streaming, aren't we?
Yes, we are now. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So as people are joining, I'll just go ahead and do the logistics thing and welcome everybody to this evening's presentation. For those of you who don't know, my name is Judy Kitt, and I'm the current president of the Foundation for Mind Being Research, FMBR. I know that some of you, this might be the first time you've heard of us, so I just want to let you know that we were founded in 1980 by scientists and artists and healers who were interested in exploring the nature of human consciousness through the lens of science, spirituality, and ancient wisdom traditions. One of our favorite quotes is from Albert Einstein, who said, "You can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it." And so for the last 40 years now, we've been working to expand the context within which we see ourselves as individuals and as a species, and really as part of the whole that is the universe as we know it. So we believe that as more and more of us begin to see ourselves differently, as connected, new possibilities arise, including solutions to the challenges we face as a result of believing that we're separate. And that's part of what tonight's presentation is about as well. So I encourage you to check us out at fmbr.org. Just some logistics before we start. We usually do our meetings as a webinar where you would just see the speaker. Tonight's meeting, tonight is a meeting format so that we can have some dialogue. So you may see up to 100 people on your screen if you scroll through. I'd like to recommend that you click on the words speaker view at the top right-hand side of your screen so that you'll see Carolyn in her screen instead of just a tiny thumbnail of her. Most of you are muted for now. If you'd like to ask a question, just hit raise hand on the bottom bar there. And I will unmute you if you have a question, or you can unmute yourself by pressing the space bar and holding it. Or you can click on the microphone in the lower left-hand corner of the screen and hit unmute. You can also ask questions by typing them in the chat box. If you're watching the live stream on YouTube, you can type your questions into the comment section and Mary will be monitoring them, and I'll ask those questions for you. So I know Carolyn is looking forward to hearing your questions and to having a robust dialogue. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jerry Jin, who is the chairman of FMBR. He has studied extensively with Carolyn and he wanted to be able to introduce her. So Jerry, go ahead. Sure.
Well, it's a pleasure to be able to introduce Caroline Cory. I've known her for many years now, and in fact, I should tell you the story of how I met her and the courses that I took with her, because it was life transforming, basically. It was back in 2008, and I went to a conference, and at the conference, Carolyn gave a meditation connecting to the source, and the vibration of that meditation was so high that I said I had to learn more from Carolyn. And I did, because she'd been offered a course, it's a one-time thing that was called a master's course that lasted a whole year. And in that course, we learned so much. Much of my education in this whole field comes from Carolyn. We learned, much of what we learned had to do with guided meditations, in which we would connect and she would guide us and we'd learn things. So it wasn't, well, this is the way it is, but it was, let's experience it together. And so she was able to guide us the right frequencies. And those frequencies, I think, are the basis of what a lot of her healing work. She's created something called Omnium universe, and created the Omnium method of healing and teaching about consciousness. And it's an amazing set of teachings. And I strongly recommend anyone who's really interested with regard to healing and connecting to source and things of that nature and consciousness to take a look at her website, which is Omnium Universe. And her method really helps to connect people to a frequency that is higher. And getting to that frequency is really sort of the key to much of what goes on in the world. And so I thank her for introducing me to all of that. And Carolyn also has amazing abilities, and that's what I learned during that year. As a child, she was able to connect to energies and you call it channeling or whatever. She was able to connect to the spirit side of the world and the other beings that are there. And she'd be able to tell us about that and try to introduce us to those beings. And I found that absolutely fascinating information. So with all that, she's learned a lot about consciousness, and her abilities in that whole field has led her to develop further. And I really enjoyed her growth, which she had in mind all along. It's something that she was planning, but she created, after Omnium Universe and Omnium Method, she created Omnium Media.
Yeah.
And she's created some amazing documentaries, and you've now seen Superhuman and the Invisible Made Visible. And I think that what she's trying to do there, I really applaud her in the scope of that, because what it says is that everyone has these abilities and people don't realize that. And that's the whole basis of FMBR, basically, is to be able to bring the science into the metaphysical so that people can see and understand who they really are. And this film that Carolyn has created enables all that to really, really occur. And I think that is so marvelous that people are able to know that they are more. And let's see, and I enjoyed the speakers that she brought into that film. A lot of them have been speakers with regard to FMBR. We've had Eben Alexander when we did our sessions with ions. She introduces us to remote viewing and with the people that she has. And I'm very happy that Russell Targ is with us tonight, and we'll get that aspect of it also. And Dean Radin is, we see him very often in the Bay Area. So I saw him in the first class that of the Blindfold class. He was there. He asked some questions. I heard those questions. So I think, the media thing with regard to what she's doing, she says, we write, direct, produce, and executive produce various projects, mainly in the areas of sci-fi, science, supernatural, paranormal, existentialism, raising awareness, and self-development. And she's also, you see her in many, many different places. She's with a lot of the different types of shows that are out there. Unexplained with William Shatner, the History Channel with Ancient Aliens. And so I'm very, very happy that Carolyn is with us tonight, and that you'll be able to experience her. And hopefully all of you have experienced the show, Superhuman. If not, you have to see that afterwards. But we'll have some good questions with regard to all this. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Carolyn. Thank you.
Hey, Jerry. So good to see you. It's been like ages, 2008, right?
Yeah, 2008.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm just so happy that our paths have crossed at that time, but also especially now coming back together.
Yep.
So I'm so glad you found me again and we're connecting again. Thanks so much for this introduction. And it's true, actually, everything that I'm doing, the movies, the books, the classes, it's all based on the same principle, that we are made of source frequency. We are made of the same sort of fabric. But we come here and we forget how it all works, and we get confused with how to meditate, how it all works, like what do we connect with? And so, because my experiences started at a very young age, since I was 5, I would have these experiences where I would look at someone and I knew exactly what was happening to them, what was going to happen the next day. I would see what was on the other side of the wall, things like that. And it was spontaneous. And actually, I thought everybody does that. All children do that. I didn't think I was special. I didn't think anything of it at the time. But that got me asking the questions. How did I do this? How is it possible that I tap into information that I didn't know about beforehand? And what did my physical brain have to do to get there? Is all meditation, no matter what type of meditation, does it all get you to the same place, you know? So because of these questions, basically I got onto this journey, 20 years journey to try to understand the mechanics of consciousness itself. And when you start asking these questions, you cannot avoid the question of what is the container within which this consciousness exists and how it all interacts together. And so eventually, because everything was experiential, I never had a guru or a teacher. I never went to India. I didn't follow any specific teaching. It all came spontaneously in this direct experience. And of course, I would get validation. So I would get that information, and then the next day or the next month or whatever, it would be in the news, it would be in an article, it would be whatever. So having these validations over and over, I started to realize that, wait, if I am getting those validation, meaning this information, however I'm able to tap into this information, this mechanism is real. We don't know how it works, but it works. And so because of that, the teachings that you mentioned, Jerry, I wanted to base the teaching on the same principle of experiencing the information. So all my teaching is experiential. So I don't want people to listen and say, you know, I tell them this is this and that, and then you just kind of absorb it mentally, and then you take it for granted. It doesn't work this way, because to me, I experienced the information. It was like my cells were telling me what the information is. And I think this is so important, because you're no longer functioning in a linear brain capacity type thing, but you are functioning like your whole brain functions as a whole. It's almost like you're absorbing the information, 100% of the information through your cells. That's a whole way of existing. And when you do that, then you're tapping, you become coherent with the intelligence of the universe. And you can use that for anything you want, for healing, for just understanding the mechanics of this or the mechanics of that. And so I think that is the base principle, the basic principle of all my work. So whether it's through the workshops or the classes that you took, Jerry, or the healers program, I'm not sure if you took that one, but how to be able to use that sort of coherence for healing. But I realized eventually that not everybody wants to sit down and take a class, go through a workshop like you did, or read books. And so that's how I said, okay, at this point, we know this is real. There's hundreds and hundreds of people around the world doing this work. We have this validation. Let's see if we can put it in a medium that is more appealing, let's say. And so that's how I started to get into the apps, the short videos, and eventually that turned into a whole production of documentary films. And so So that's kind of how it all came about, but it's based on the same sort of principle. Now in Superhuman, that was a whole different level, I thought, because I tried to bring more of the scientific validation. I mean, how else we know that the mind, our consciousness affects reality, interacts with the physical reality, but how? And is there any way to measure, to make it more measurable, more observable, especially to the average person? So that was the attempt in Superhuman, and I think I succeeded. I thought I did. So anyway, this is kind of how it all came about and where we are today.
That's wonderful. I know Russell has a question. He sent it in earlier. And Russell, do you want to unmute yourself, or I can do it if you like? Let's see. I have to find you. There, I think you're unmuted. Go ahead.
My turn down now.
Yep.
Hey, Russell.
Oh, glad to see you. I thought you were a wonderful film. So my first question is, how can people see it? Are you going to be streaming it on any of the streaming services? When will it be available?
It's already available. Actually, we have a distributor that is handling the distribution. So it's available on multiple platforms. The best way is to go to superhumanfilm.com, and you will click on rent or buy, and you will see all the platforms. So it's on Amazon, iTunes, Vudu, and like all these platforms are listed there.
So you're presently streaming on Amazon.
Yes.
That's terrific. That's my favorite platform, because it's where I made a film last year called Third Eye Spies. So we're streaming mates then.
Yeah, I saw your film, by the way. Bravo. I loved it. Excellent job.
What I liked about your film is it's very generous. You show us lots of interesting different things. And I was especially happy to see the work of George Weissman rotating the little spirals in the bell jar. It's a very well-controlled, convincing experiment. Likewise, a physicist that he was working with rotating a little compass in a vacuum.
Yes.
And I think I understood what he was doing there. And I'll just say it because it was not so clear. A sort of inside baseball. That is, he had the compass inside of a vacuum so that nothing in the atmosphere would affect it. But we believe that psychokinetic things like George and your physicists were doing extract energy from the ambiance in order to do things. So he had to provide the little vibration from the radio speaker in order for his consciousness to manipulate that vibration and turn the compass. So I'd never. We had a similar experiment 40 years ago at SRI, where you needed a little vibration in order to create the big thing later on. So I was very happy, but we did not publish. That was a 1-week experiment with the great psychic Pat Price. And yes, indeed, he could turn the pendulum. But I was very happy to see that on film, because it's an important experiment that shows our consciousness does have extension, and our consciousness then participates in the quantum mechanical world and can actually do stuff. And I'm very familiar with George Weissman's rotating pendulum, rotating spiral. And I know that he can do that most of the time from the people he studied with in St. Petersburg. So I'm happy to see that archived.
That's great. Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned this. So for those who did not watch the film, basically in a nutshell, it's about the power of consciousness, the mind over matter, over our physical world. And so I've decided to select different types of experiments throughout the film each one demonstrating how this could be possible. And so one of the experiments, the one that Russell's talking about, is telekinesis. Of course, you know, we focus on a pendulum. It's a piece of paper, actually, and then we try to make it rotate. And so I worked with one of the scientists that Russell's mentioning is Mike Willicke. So Mike, so of course, the first thing when you look at you affecting a piece of paper without touching it, people think, oh, you're moving the electromagnetics. So from your body, you're amplifying your electromagnetic field, which is interfering or interacting with the object. And that's how you're making it rotate. Yes, but then we do it under a container. We do it under a sealed container. First it's glass, then it's a double glass. And then the reason why I wanted to work with Mike is because he has such rigorous scientific protocols. You know, he said, well, we need to put it under vacuum. So we started working with the vacuum, but even then we were also controlling the temperature. So we had a device.
It's important to mention, and it does not work in vacuum because the system extracts energy from the molecules around. And if you suck out all the molecules, then your consciousness has nothing to work with. So he has to provide a little vibration from the loudspeaker because the fact that you can stop the experiment is very important. There's generally no way to block ESP, for example, but the fact that by sucking out the air turns off the psychokinesis, and by putting in a little vibration from the speaker brings it back, is a very important experiment because it shows that you have some control over this otherwise very mysterious ability.
Yeah, so actually this was, so he started doing it in a vacuum, and he believed that it's impossible for consciousness to affect anything in a vacuum because, like you're saying, there's pretty much no air molecules, the temperature is controlled. So what is consciousness interacting with to make it move? So he believed that it was impossible. We needed to introduce some sort of vibration. So he introduced this mechanical coming from the small speaker. It's basically a small beat, and it did not affect it very much. It was just basically like when we do a baseline, meaning we take measurements over a period of time, we can see the mechanical movement of this speaker. So it's very, very, very small over a long period of time, but it's observable. And then the minute that I focus on it or he focuses on it, it jumps to something crazy. And then when we stop focusing on it, it goes back. So that's how we know that this mechanical beat is not really responsible for the effect of consciousness when we work with the device. Having said that, to be honest with you, I still believe that there is a way for consciousness to affect a physical object even without introducing any sort of wave, a mechanical wave or any sort of wave. Because I believe, okay, I'm saying right now, disclaimer, we haven't been able to prove that. I'm just saying this is just what I feel and believe, and I'm working towards. I think that consciousness is capable. So if the air molecules are completely gone because it's under vacuum and there's nothing to work with, I believe consciousness has the ability to introduce through information the air molecule in the vacuum. In other words, and also, I don't know, that's also debatable because even under vacuum, there's almost no air, but there's always like one or two molecules, I believe. It's never like 100%. So, but even with that, I really believe that perhaps consciousness has the ability to create an air molecule from scratch.
Well, I think you're right. That is, in the bell jar, where there's air available, the consciousness brings order to the Brownian motion. And in the experiments we did, it was very similar. You would have a baseline tiny vibration, and then when Pat Price or Dwayne Elgin would stare at the little pendulum, then you get a very big signal. Well, I sat with Kulagina once, many, 1983. Kulagina was the great Russian psychokinetic practitioner who did big stuff. That is, she could roll a cigar tube or knock over a box of matches, or those are the kind of things, the macro effect. But she really had to huff and puff in order to do that. I don't mean that she blew it over, but she was, it was, her heart rate would go up and she'd perspire. And what I gathered from the Russians I talked to when I was in St. Petersburg is that you could do the micro effects that you're able to put together as a natural ability of consciousness, whereas striking down an enemy or collecting the paper clips or moving over the matchbox requires a different kind of macroscopic energy. They're both psychokinesis caused by your thoughts. For example, when Uri Geller bends a spoon, that's not gathering together the ambient air molecules. It's something is really happening on the macro level.
Yeah, I believe there are different ways, and I think what you're mentioning has more to do with the electromagnetic field of the energy field, because it is literally being amped up and moving the object in this way. Same with the spoon bending, which we do in the classes as well. But to demonstrate that this was possible, I actually did it, as you saw in the movie, I did it long distance. So long distance, then you have to rule out any sort of electromagnetic interaction, because you're so far away. I was 1,000 miles away, and the thing didn't rotate 5 degrees. It rotated 780 degrees, which is very significant. I mean,
you should be happy to know that George is able to rotate his spirals from a room away.
Yeah.
He likes to watch it on television to get the feedback, to get it through. But he can sit at his desk, look at the TV screen, and observe the twirling spiral 10 meters away.
Exactly. So then this, go ahead, sorry.
It's a real far field effect.
Exactly. So then you rule out, in this case, the effect of the electromagnetic field being the one responsible for any sort of motion or effect on the physical object. So, again, so at this point, I want to say that I worked with Mike for a while. The latest, let's say, like the experiments that we were able to do over and over and over were long distance, under vacuum, temperature controlled, most of the time with the mechanical vibration. Moving forward, we're now going to try to demonstrate that it's possible to do it even without the mechanical. He doesn't believe that. I believe that. So let's see, we're going to be butting heads a little bit. So I will keep you posted.
Well, you can do it without the mechanical. It just uses a different part of your, I was in Brazil talking with healers who would move the couch, set the house on fire, kill the enemy. I mean, all sorts of macro things were part of their life. The Umbanda were considered dangerous, powerful people that you didn't want to mess with.
Right.
Now, before you had enough of Russell Targ, I do have one other thing to say. The PK experiments you showed were excellent, and I'm very happy you got them on film. I have reservations about the way the children who are apparently showing off blind sight with the eye covering, because that kind of blindfold is really not very secure. The magicians use that all the time. on stage and for demonstrations. And these little kids aren't aware, my opinion, my little kids aren't aware that looking down their nose to read is a bad thing to do because you reinforce it. So if the kid looks down and can read a book because he can see the book and you reinforce that, he'll continue to do it. He doesn't realize that that's the problem. But for the observer, it's a big problem because you're telling the audience that he magically can see through the blindfold. And in my opinion, that's not at all what he's doing.
Yeah, so Dean Radin also had the same reservation. I mean, I have to say that I investigated this phenomenon myself. I cannot speak to everyone out there who's posting stuff on YouTube. I can only speak about the groups and the individuals that I have personally worked with, encountered, researched, and the methodology that I researched, and the classes that we have been teaching as well. So what happens is that even if there's a little bit of light that comes in from the side or even at the bottom, most of the time they are actually looking straight through the mask. So in this, sometimes, you know, the angle of the camera, whatever, they're looking down. There's
I'm very familiar with this, as
Yeah.
you probably are now. All of the times the kid would hold the book in his lap. The
Yeah.
time I'm reading a book or hold it in front of me, they didn't do that. They held it in their lap. So it seemed super clear to me that they were looking down through the thing. There's a very cute video where a magician has his tiny son reading, and they put a big soup pot over his head. It's so big that it's resting on the kid's shoulders. And the kid would hold a card, hold it on his arm, but you could see that in order to read it, he has to move it into his line of vision, which is the bottom of the soup pot. So,
Yeah.
I mean, on the internet, there's a whole corner of the internet involved blindfold reading. So,
Yeah. So
I'm
yeah,
not saying your kids were necessarily doing that, but Dean and I both grow up doing magic. So
Yeah.
we're very conscious in doing ESP research that we don't want our experiment to look like a magic trick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I'm sure that this could be reproduced somehow as a magic trick, but I'm talking about, like I said, the people that I have worked with. And so these kids, for example, that's how they were reading, but then you would hold up something, you know, straight into, you know, their eye line. So it wasn't underneath that. And they didn't know what I was going to hold up. And they would know exactly. You saw we pulled cards. They didn't know what card. And in fact, sometimes I would write something on a piece of paper. And so they didn't know what I was going to write. And I would hold up the piece of paper. So you know, so we do also demonstrate in the film that it's not always just reading this way. So there's that. Also, there are other groups. We brought in that the scientific part of this is that we wanted to measure the amount of light inside the mask. You saw that in the movie as well. And so they put a device to actually measure the number of light photon inside the mask. And then it was 0. It means there's like no light whatsoever. And when it went down to 0, people were still able to read or see objects or see color. And then they were able to see on the side and behind their back. So how is that even possible? So that's the reason why.
That's what I was longing. I was longing for them to see something behind them.
Yeah.
Or the simple thing you could have done is just put a picture in an envelope and say, what's in the envelope?
This is slightly different. It's a different, because that becomes remote viewing. it's a different process, like I said. So once if you go through the training, which I think Jerry started the training, because we're doing it online now because we can't do anything in person. Sometimes online I would hold up something to the camera and I'll say, what is this? And so you try to read it. But sometimes I would hold it up under the table and they could still read it. So this is a form of remote viewing. But when we are teaching with the color, and then we're basically, when we do the training, which by the way, you're welcome to join. I'm happy to, invite you as part of the training. So for you to feel it, because once you do the training, you kind of you realize what your brain is trying to do, figure out a way to see when technically you're not supposed to see. And so as we're doing the training, for example, we start to stretch, train the brain to stretch the peripheral vision and to try to see or imagine that you're able to see on your side, which of course everybody can see. But then you train your brain to continue to expand to be able to see just the same to the back of your head. So it's a different process than remote viewing. You're telling.
Describe the thing on the wall behind them just as well as on the lap in front of them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So the kids can do
the community then, if you would do a careful double-blind experiment.
Yeah.
Where the kid is describing something behind him so it doesn't look like a familiar magic trick.
Exactly. And so that's what we're doing. In fact, I'm going to do a conference. So I have kids there's one kid in Germany who puts, so there's tape, where you tape your eyes with a Band-Aid type thing. And then he puts black tape over it. And then he puts the mask. It's impossible for any.
What we like to tape them is just put a tiny bit of tape and tape the eyes shut.
Exactly. It is. They are type shut. They are shut. They are taped shut.
The reason that Dean Radin and I get so excited about these experiments is that even when we work with our great prodigious experiments like Ingo Swann and Pat Price and Joe McMoneagle, nobody can read.
Yeah.
But all of our people can draw wonderful architectural drawings of things in Siberia, but they can't read a picture. They can't read anything on the blackboard in the next room.
Yeah. So I'll send you, we just took this video because we were going to do an online conference to demonstrate that live. And so, so I did a little test first with one of the kids, and then I'll show you how, he tapes his eyes shut. He puts black tape on top of the tape, and then he wears this and he can read. I mean, it's insane. And what happens is that, so the classes we've been doing online, kids can read after the second lesson. Third lesson, they're doing puzzles and all kinds of stuff. And even in my adult class, Jerry, I don't know how many classes you've taken, but I have one student, she can read. In fact, I posted this on my Facebook as well. So we took short videos where she's just going around reading stuff. And so, it's so kind of mind-boggling that even when it starts to happen, for example, in the very beginning, you put the blindfolds on and you let your brain kind of get used to the idea that, you can't see and it's all dark. And then you start to see something. So the first reflex is, wait, my mask is leaking light. It's impossible, because we're so programmed to think it's impossible. So there's a lot of having to retrain your brain to accept the fact that it is possible. So, and also there are kids who are, and adults, by the way, not just kids, who are legally blind, and yet they can start to see. So there's something going on that we don't really understand.
Is a very loosely defined thing. I'm legally blind, as it happens. My corrected vision is 2200, but I rode my motorcycle in the Silicon Valley for 35 years.
Wow.
So you can be legally blind, which means you can't read the letters on the eye chart, but you can do lots of other things.
Yeah. Well, so we're talking about reading. Yeah, exactly.
legally blind person has lots of abilities that are unsuspected.
Yeah, but we're talking about reading. That's what I was saying, that technically they can't read, and then they
I
start to read.
can't read without my glasses, which are about 13 diopters. So a ton of optical power in my glasses allow me to read.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so somebody you have a little kid who no, it was in one of the videos I saw. A little kid showed up, 8-year-old, he's legally blind. My feeling is, why isn't he wearing glasses?
Hmm.
And the answer, we don't have to go into the answer to that is, to make him read, you've got to get a lot of optical power, and then you can read at about 3 inches, and most people don't want to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Caroline?
Yeah.
Caroline? I'm sorry. Somebody had sent in a question, just speaking of children. She was talking about children with anxiety disorders and ADHD, which is so prevalent right now, and just wondering about, what kind of trainings you would recommend. Would that help?
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing that I wanted to mention, is that this training has a lot of like positive side effects. In fact, even your normal vision seems to improve. We don't know. Again, I'm saying these things, but we're still trying to figure out how it works. We just know that it works. And so we noticed that the actual vision seems to improve. The child has a lot more, they're calmer. It seems to improve and help with dyslexia. With autistic children seem to be a lot more focused. So it definitely seems to help with a lot of different things that seem to be unrelated. And I think my speculation is that you are basically talking to your brain and getting it to perform a task that normally it shouldn't perform. And by doing that, first of all, you believe that you are capable of making your brain do whatever you want it to do. And this is where you start to get the self-confidence, I think. Also the focus. Because you're focused on making your brain behave a certain way. So you're more concentrated, you're more calm. And these are the effects that we've been noticing in those types of children, for sure.
Mary wants to know, I can't remember, what is Mark Ireland's father's name? I think it was back in the 50s or 60s, Mark Ireland's father was a famous psychic, and he used to go on shows, with his eyes taped shut, and, and then he would read things and answer questions from papers that people had, from questions that people had written on paper. It's Mary wanted to know if you had seen that or if you'd heard of him.
I haven't seen that, but again, I think there are different ways to go about it. You can use your psychic abilities, maybe not to read specifically, but to kind of like see what somebody's holding up. It could be is it something long? Is it something sharp or whatever? Or you can do remote viewing, something like a remote viewing exercise. But the actual blindfold training is yet another type of ability. So I don't know exactly that person that you're mentioning. If I looked at it.
Mary just texted me. His name is Richard Ireland. If anyone wants to, watch him on YouTube or something. Alice wants to know where she can find more about your training.
So in fact, if you don't mind, I'll just share my screen real quick.
Okay.
And then you'll see, let me see, so this is the website. It is superhumanfilm.com. And when you go to the website, the first thing you see is rent or buy. So when you click on that, you can see all the platforms. This Russell was asking about that. So you'll see all the platforms where it's showing. But then if you go to workshop, you see up here workshops. If you click on workshops, then you'll see, so this is blindfold perception for kids 4 to 14. This one is already passed. So, we already did 2 full series. so people can, if they want to download, they can download the series and learn on their own. But I think for children, it's probably better to follow the training with the teacher. So right now we're teaching kids in Australia, but then the next one that opens up, you can sign up for. This one is another training that has to do with, I teach a specific type of meditation for this type of work, anything that's mind over matter. Not every meditation does something. I mean, every type of meditation does something different. So that's why people say, oh, I meditate, but maybe not for this kind of exercise. To do telekinesis is a specific type of meditation. So I teach that in this course, remote viewing. So remote viewing, Russell knows, of course, there's the way the guy in the government program, they taught it. But so I introduced a little bit of that, but then I introduced another technique that the way I remote view, the way I've been remote viewing since I was a kid, which is kind of different. It is different for people to have a different approach, and then they can decide what works for them. This telekinesis, spoon bending, group telekinesis. So this is this course. And then here's the blindfold class for adults. So we started it September 12. In fact, tomorrow is the last class, but you can download the previous ones and do it at your own pace. It's pretty clear, right, Jerry? It's pretty, you can follow the exercise. You can see me. There's like a PowerPoint, and then you can see the object. So it's pretty easy for you to follow. So these are the classes for this type of training. And then this is one, it's in Germany in person. That's in April. And there's other ones that we had in person, but we had to cancel because of COVID and stuff like that. So these are the classes that have to do with the film, meaning, because Jerry was mentioning about energy medicine and consciousness expansion and other types of work, but for the blindfold training, for telekinesis and stuff like that, this is the page for that.
Excellent, thank you. I had a question from Steve about the DNA, the changes to DNA that you were doing with Glenn Ryan.
Yes.
And he wanted to know that with the pH changes, is that unique to you, or is that unique to healers? Or he wanted to know if that's something that people can do without training, or you'd have to have some sort of training to do that kind of thing.
All of the things that we demonstrated, anybody can do. And that's the reason why, I put myself in some of the experiments just to show, because I've done it so many times. I knew I was going to be able to do it on camera very quickly and easily. But as you saw in the film, we introduced people who had never done anything like this before. Telekinesis, we brought in a person, she had never done anything. The person who did the remote viewing, she had never, ever done anything like this before. In 2 hours, Paul, gave us like a crash course, and she nailed it. It was unbelievable.
Paul's a very good teacher.
Yeah, Paul is a great teacher, and we were blown away. He was blown away. And so that's why anybody can do this. For the DNA, it's the same thing. In fact, that was my first experiment, one of the first experiments that I started doing with Glenn. That was maybe 5 years ago. And I was actually surprised, because when I work with when I work with water, the effect is very, very different than or DNA it feels very, very different than when I'm trying to move a physical object. It's almost like the DNA or the water is part of you, is an extension of you. And it's almost like the second that I think it happens. It almost before I think it's already happened. And I feel like my energy would zap it. But I would kind of still look at it like, did it just happen? It just happened. It is so immediate. The effect and the feeling is very fascinating, but it's very different. When I work with a physical object, it's almost so funny because I feel like when I'm focusing on it and I want it to rotate, I have a feeling that it's talking back to me. It's telling me, well, I don't want to rotate, and it's kind of like pushing me back. It's as if it has an ego. So the experience is very, very different. So I had to kind of learn what am I working with, or am I affecting an electrical device? Am I trying to make this electrical thing move? So the interaction of consciousness with a biological system versus an electrical device versus a physical object is very different. And so I want to say that the easiest is the biological system, which is like DNA. The very first time I did that with Glenn, like I said, I think it's like 4 years ago, I just looked at it and it shot up 400%. In a split second. And again, for those who are listening, when we do a scientific experiment, we take measurement, we take a baseline over a period of time. We measure it over and over and over. So we know it's not moving, it's not moving, it's not moving. And exactly at the time that you're looking at it, it just shoots up 400%. And then when you stop looking, it goes back to the baseline.
What were you measuring that shot up 400%?
The electrical conductivity through the DNA sample. So we were measuring the impedance, the resistance of electricity through the, so anybody can do this, but you have to have, the proper, devices and measuring devices and stuff like that. For the pH also, it was a bit tricky, but then because what happens with the water, it's not the same as the DNA, because you are DNA, you're working with DNA. It's almost like there's that resonance, that happens spontaneously. But water, we had to also decide, because when I focus on water, the very first time, okay, what type of water? Should it be distilled water? Should it be structured water? Should it be reverse osmosis water, tap water? So we had to kind of figure out, because every single time it would be a different experience. So when we worked with, for example, even bottled water, I had a hard time even focusing on the pH, because there were so many particles, there were so many bad things that they were interfering, that were making the water heavy or whatever. So I was spending time like cleaning it first. Then we said, oh, let's just go to distilled water, because, all the particles. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, with water, it's a little bit trickier, but you can find the purest form of water and try to affect the pH. And you can find pretty sensitive measuring devices. Usually you really need like laboratory grade to get accurate results. But I think there is some consumer grade pH meters where you can see some sort of fluctuation. So you can practice with that as well. And then the physical object, that's, like I said, that's a whole animal, but that's to answer your question about the DNA.
In looking at your graphics, I saw a horizontal body float by. Does that mean you're teaching people to have out-of-body experiences?
Oh yeah, I don't really recommend out-of-body experiences, because I feel like we are supposed to have a stretch of consciousness while we're in the body. So instead of coming out of the body, doing stuff and coming back inside the body, it's almost like the cells of the body didn't really experience it the same way. So the way I teach it is that you stay in the body, you're actually very anchored. And then you stretch your consciousness. You're still here and you're there at the same time. So whatever happens there also happens in your body at the same time. So it's registering on a cellular level, and that's the difference.
But let me give you a different way of looking at it. In our remote viewing experiments at SRI, we never wanted to frighten anyone. So we didn't want an inexperienced person to ever go to the management and say, Targ separated my consciousness from my body. I can't get back together, because that'd be the end of the program.
Yeah.
But with an experienced viewer, I might go with her to the distant place and guide her around. Because in remote viewing, a person can describe something very accurately, and then they're done because they're happy they gave an interesting description, which may or may not be true. But I want them to open the door, go inside, tell me what's in the room. And to do that, I really have to go with them and say, I'll open the door, I'll turn on the lights. Now what do you see? So we sort of go together and make a significant commitment to bringing our attention and experience to that distant place.
Yeah. Yeah, that works too. I guess it's still through your intention. You can just intend to stay in your body and there at the same time, and have. But I like the fact that you accompany them. I think this works as well.
I have 2 questions that come in that are going to require some conjecture on your part.
Okay.
Going back to the consciousness, psychokinesis in a vacuum. So this is Mike. Hi, Mike. Who says that consciousness, it's hard for consciousness to perform psychokinesis in a vacuum, but it can do so in a Faraday cage at atmospheric pressure. Would it work in space with no air but vibrations?
Space where? Like,
Mike, you're going to have to unmute yourself to give more detail in this.
Because there's always some sort of magnetism somewhere. I mean, like, so what do you mean by in space?
Just in spaceships, out in space, travel to the moon, travel to Mars, just space in general, outside of Earth.
Of course, because even outside of Earth, you still have waves and you still have magnetism and you still have all kinds of forces at play. It's not just on the Earth. And so so I think the argument, though, is where we left off last time, is that Mike Willicke, the scientist, he believed that you have to have some sort of force, like something, whether it's mechanical or electromagnetic or something, or an air molecule, even 2 air molecules to build on. And so we're still kind of in that process of deciding or discovering, is this true, or can consciousness start from scratch, even there's nothing at all? But I don't know if there's ever nothing at all. You know what I mean? Like, even if there's like 2 air molecules, that's still 2 air molecules that the consciousness could grab onto, even though it's under a vacuum. The way I see it is that consciousness operates at a different level. It operates in terms of information. It has nothing to do with the forces at play. Information is almost like, if I want to say, it is the force that is before the natural forces. So it's information, it's my intention that is creating the force necessary to create a particle of air, an air molecule. Does that make sense? I believe that is how it is. Consciousness is primordial. Consciousness is fundamental, meaning it is before. There's no before and after in a linear sense, but just as a kind of an explanation, I feel consciousness creates whatever it is, including physical particles. That's the reason why I'm convinced that even in a complete vacuum, consciousness can invent an air molecule from scratch. I believe that's how creation happens.
Okay, we have the atmospheric pressure, the thing a vacuum gauge would measure. Then we have all sorts of vibrations, out in what quantum space. You have quantum particles appearing, disappearing. So it seems like there's a lot of activity. I'm wondering, what of that is necessary or beneficial in order to do psychokinesis, for instance?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like it's all present in one way or another, but to me, consciousness permeates all of it. It's fundamental. It's before it. So it doesn't matter what kind of force, what kind of wave, what kind of quantum effect. Consciousness makes whatever happen. That's my belief. That's what I'm going to prove. I'm going to get there when I'll tell you that's when we can try to experiment with Mike, continue on those, build on those experiments, and be in a complete vacuum without any mechanical at least that would be a good starting point. So I will keep you posted. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like consciousness is before, it's like, to me, I mean, I could also, because you're using human words to express concepts that are beyond human, you know?
Yeah,
And
you're going
so,
a level deeper than what I was thinking of. So
yeah, but that's kind of where I am. That's how I experience life and the mechanics of world.
Very thoughtful question. That is, if your consciousness was just sitting here and you want to do something in space, well, there's basically nothing in space, so it'd be hard to do something in space. If you wanted to affect somebody's spaceship 100,000 miles away, well, that spaceship would have plenty of excess energy. So in my opinion, since I know that Ingo can sit in the laboratory and accurately describe the rings around Jupiter instantaneously with no problem, so the distance doesn't exist for consciousness.
Exactly.
Your consciousness transcends that distance instantaneously. And since the thing you want to interact with is probably going to be some kind of hot object, even if it's a rock or spacecraft, I think you could interact with that spacecraft 500,000 miles away. When you say, can you affect space? If there's nothing in space, you wouldn't know that you'd done any effect.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I think it must be a yes.
Frozen.
So here's the other conjecture question before I get to the next. Someone wanted to know if you think it's possible that psychokinesis was used to create the pyramids.
Oh, 1,000%. I think it's more sound waves, which again, going back to my theory and my experience, consciousness being primordial, being fundamental, being permeating all of energy forms in existence, can also interact with sound waves. And sound, I use sound in healing, not a machine that emits sound. I project a specific sound wave and I can see the effect that it does, as opposed to projecting a light wave. Jerry, maybe you took that course. I don't know. It's in the healers program. And when you project a light wave, it has a certain effect on the cell. It kind of like softens it. It has a specific effect. But when I project a sound wave, it fractures it. And it's all consciousness. There's no machine that's emitting a sound or anything like that. So my point being, consciousness has the ability to use different types of waves, including acoustic waves. And those waves have a specific effect, have a very strong, it's like a laser on the physical object that can literally fracture it. If it can fracture it, means it can move it. And so, of course, we're talking, sounds very sci-fi, but to me, if you fast forward a few thousand years, there are civilizations that know exactly what I'm talking about. They have been doing this, forever. They're born knowing about this. They're born understanding all of these principles. And when you do that, you grow up understanding how it works. And then you know that you can literally move a physical object through sound wave. Your consciousness has to do that. And in fact, again, speaking of spaceships, that's how spaceships actually work. It's the consciousness interacts with the physical object through the it's conducted, well, anyway, so yeah, through the apparatus, and then that is what makes it move. It's not a propulsion system. Forget it. Propulsion system, we need like gazillion years before we can get from point A to point B. It doesn't even make sense. And so that's how you can go from this point to that point instantaneously, because your mind knows that coordinate and you think your way over there and the spaceship follows. So it's it's the same principle. So 1,000%, that's how it was done.
Excellent. Thank you. So Peter wants to know, he's curious about the spiritual implications of all this. But for starters, he says, with seeing without eyes, when one has developed this ability, what other perceptions, if any, are opened up for them? Seeing themselves as soul or spirit, receiving guidance more readily from a higher self, or seeing angels perhaps, or as energy bodies, anything like that. Do the children or the people who have undergone this training, do they also have this kind of spiritual awakening?
Yeah, Peter, I so appreciate your question, because to me, that is really ultimate goal, I want to say, is to understand your true essence and who you really are. And as a spirit being, and your connection, your spiritual connection to the universe, to existence. So all of these tools, to me, these are just exercises that help you remember to refocus on your consciousness having the ability to create your experience. When you do that, you are refocusing on your true essence, your ability. So it's not, hey, I can read with the things. No, it's about, oh my God, by me thinking, by me focusing my intention, I have a measurable physical evidence that my consciousness creates reality. So when you start doing that, you start to open up and kind of reactivate, rediscover who you really are. And that opens the doorway to all kinds of abilities. I cannot say that every single person is going to have, the exact same enlightenment effect just by doing this, but there's all kinds of things that start to happen. And especially the way I teach this, because which I haven't found in other teaching styles. I'm talking about this particular technique. The first thing that we do, other than the meditation, other than the becoming aware of the mind chatter and everything else, and being able to quiet and to center and all of that, you also start to bring up stuff, and you'd be surprised. For example, I have some people who put this on and all kinds of stuff out of nowhere starts to come up. For example, I feel claustrophobic. They're not claustrophobic, but all of a sudden they feel claustrophobic. And so where did that come from? So you want to address it, and then that opens up a doorway to like, oh, this is an old pattern that you had in this lifetime or another lifetime. And so you have to undo that before you can move on. Because you see, you can't make your brain do something. You can't say, I want to see with the blindfolds on now, while at the same time your subconscious mind is freaking out because it's claustrophobic, it's feeling claustrophobic. So what I'm saying is, you uncover all kinds of subconscious pattern, all kinds of blocks, all kinds of things that you have to deal with as you're doing this training. This is how I approach it anyway. And that's how you gradually start to kind of like rediscover your true essence. So of course, this is spirituality. This is your spirituality, is understanding and experiencing the spirit aspect of your being and how it's interacting with the world. And it starts to bring up also the purpose. Gradually, as you keep moving, you start to open up your ability to see. Again, not everybody, but some people start to see their third eye, even though this is not third eye. This is not third eye work. Something else that I teach is third eye work. You start to open up your sensitivity to other subtle energy, other beings around you, because that's part of the training. And eventually, as you do more and more and more of this, then you start to understand more of the bigger picture. What did I come here to do? Nothing to do with this. You came here to do a lot more than that. So to me, it's definitely part of understanding your spirituality. That was a very long answer, but I thought it was good.
And a great question, Peter. Thank you.
Was that helpful, Peter? Oh, does he have his mic on?
Did you?
Sorry,
Yeah.
what did you say?
Was that helpful?
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much for answering that so beautifully.
Cool, cool, awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited about your work.
Oh, thank you so much. Have you seen the movie?
Yes,
Oh, great,
that's
great.
why I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a question. Do you believe in evil spirits? And is that a danger in starting to explore the spiritual world around you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I do because, and I don't know what you mean by evil, but I know dark intent or negative intent. When I started to see subtle energy, I would look at people, for example, who are sick or who are stuck, especially mental problems. I would see that they were an entity that was standing right there, and they were projecting negative things onto the person. And of course, the person couldn't see them. Sometimes they could feel, but they didn't know what, and we're not trained to be sensitive enough to discern. So when I first saw them, I was like, no, did I just make this up? Or is this, is this for real? And unfortunately, I saw too many kinds of negative entities and energies in different type, what I call thought forms. Sometimes you have, it's not a being, but it's a thought form that latches onto you. A thought form is kind of, it's a sort of like a piece of the consciousness of an entity. And so it's not the entire entity, but it's the thought form that latches onto you. And that becomes what I call an attachment. So you can read about this in the healers program. One of the class is specifically on that. And I hesitated for the longest time to talk about this and to describe them, because I thought I shouldn't be introducing, like making people aware of these things. But here's the thing. Either you want to see the truth or you don't. You can't be selective, and once you see, you cannot unsee. And I think that a lot of people who say, I want to see subtle energy like you do. And when I start teaching them how to open the third eye and how to see the subtle energy, I feel and I see the resistance, because a part of you knows once you start to see the subtle energy beyond the visible world, you're going to see everything. And there's a lot of things that are not very pretty. I kept kind of pretending or hoping this wasn't real, or but it is very much real. I was personally also kind of I also had my own personal experiences, so I know exactly how that feels. And so anyway, again, to answer your question, I definitely think that they are there, and that's what is contributing, in fact, to the chaos, to illnesses. Every single illness I've seen, especially cancer or diabetes, especially cancer, is an attachment. Every single one of them. It's an attachment of a dark entity or a thought form that's attached to your organ. So.
And so the follow-up to that is, do you teach ways to protect yourself against these attachments?
Of course. So for those who are interested, I can also show you. It's my other website. Oops, sorry. My other website basically is carolinecory.com or omniumuniverse.com. Oops, what am I saying? Omniumuniverse.com. And so this is all the healing work that Jerry was mentioning earlier. So you see the classes here. You can go to online classes and you see mastering what kind of guidance system, like how does the guidance system work? And part of this is like your spirit guides. Who are your spirit guides? Like, why should you be listening to your spirit guides? And for example, are your spirit guides different than my spirit guides? What's the difference? So it's all like a lot of detail on receiving guidance. The healers program is the one I was mentioning. It's very, very detailed. And then you'll see the different techniques I was talking about. And I think it's number 8, that one. And this guy, we talk about attachments, interference. and why we attract them, what to do about them, relationship of attachment with mental illness, ADD, ADHD, and especially disease. So all of these are covered in how to protect yourself, obviously, is part of the healers program, but also part of the guidance system. Mastering the emotional, mastering the creative formula is incredible. I love this series. It's just basically steps to recognize where you're stuck, that you're not creating something. Very, very fascinating. Physical transition. This is where we go out of body in the way I describe. Mastering the Human Mind is the series that Jerry was talking about. So there's all kinds of stuff, AI, and then here's the blindfold classes, and here's the telekinesis as well. So if you're serious, you can look through this. And then if you want to work through specific sessions, go to the healing sessions. And then you have all kinds of free, all of these are free. There's all kinds of, I have tons of free stuff, but then I have like specific to work through your own stuff, addictions, cellular reprogramming on different organs and different things, like a specific topic. So there's all kinds of stuff on this website, omniumuniverse.com or carolinecory.com. It takes you to the same place. And then you will also, I also have on my YouTube channel a lot of free stuff, tons of free stuff. Okay, bacterial infection, viruses, all of that. It's in the immune system as well. You can do sessions on the immune system. All right. So anyway, this is just to give you, I've been doing this for 20 years. And so, I have a massive library, but you can go to the, I'm also doing right now, because I have so many requests. I'm doing live clearing sessions on Wednesday. So you can go to the YouTube channel. They're completely free. Last time we did one on addiction. The one before we did on, I don't know, just, anxiety or whatever, chronic anxiety. So there's all kinds of stuff on there.
That's excellent. Okay, so we have two more questions. Mary wants to know, I think, as an extension of the evil spirits, do you have ET or other dimensional beings experience? And if so, when did they start for you? Did they start as a child?
Yes, that was my first experience when I was 5. It wasn't extraterrestrial in the sense that, the way we think of them, like a gray or an alien or whatever, like a reptilian or whatever. It was basically those light beings that what happened was I was just there and do you want me to tell you the story? Is it getting too long? But anyway, so I remember it was like Christmas Eve, and I was looking around, and my parents were doing the Christmas tree and they were all fighting, and I was like, what does this have to do with Jesus? And where's love? And these people don't know what love is, or I don't feel love, and is Christmas about love? So I was like thinking about these things, and all of a sudden I see these huge beings, and they were all light beings, and we started communicating telepathically. And so I could see who they were, where they came from, and more importantly, how we were communicating. I could see that whatever they thought was transferred directly into my brain, and then it was like a zip drive. It was like a huge concept would come into my brain would unzip it, if you will, and then I could hear what they were saying. And so I kind of understood that, oh, that's how you communicate telepathically. And that's what they said. They said, that's how you communicate telepathically, and we're going to be with you the rest of your life. So if you want to communicate telepathically, you have to ask, you have to say. So I'm like 5 years old, right? So I'm like, like focusing, like, I want this. I want to know, to continue to communicate telepathically and stay in this connection. So the biggest message, if you will, is that you have to ask. You have to focus on what it is that you want to see happen. So that's how I realized at the age of 5 that I could hear you know, telepathic communication. I could see beings that nobody else could see. I could see the subtle energy. I could see the space between me and them. And so, and how the communication is transferred. So that was the most important kind of, you know, that set me off on this path, because I kept thinking, how did that happen? And does everybody do this? And what's the difference between my consciousness, your consciousness? So anyway, that was the first type of non-human interaction. But then since then, so those beings stayed with me, if they still are. But along the way, I started interacting and seeing, and I had visitations from other type of extraterrestrial entities, from beings from Sirius B to Pleiadians. But I also had an interaction, not so good, but with reptilians and Greys that one time. And then, so a range of beings. That's how I kind of realized that there are so many. And then I started facilitating regressions, people who had encounters, who thought were abducted or what have you. And so, so working through other people as well, helping them regress to their abduction experience or whatever experience, whatever encounter experience they had, I would see different types of beings also interacting with them, or, you know, sometimes with me. So that's how eventually I kind of became so aware and had contact with so many beings, non-human beings, aliens, and some actually in physical form, but that's a different story.
Excellent.
So,
Alan wants to know if any adults have failed to see results with that first level of training that you offer. Is there anybody who can't do it?
yeah, of course. So first of all, just for you to know, the kids class is 4 sessions. And after, in fact, we just taught one tonight, and the kids could see from the very first 30 minutes. But usually the kids after the second class, third class, they can see, and we do 4 classes. For adults, it's 8 classes or more. And most of them don't see well until like the very, very end. So it's, for adults, it's a lot harder. It takes longer. It takes a lot more discipline. And so even though most people could see color almost after the second class, I want to say second or third class, but to get to read or to do like very specific stuff, it's a long process. So I'm not going to lie to you. It's much, much harder for adults.
Okay, good. And I just have one last question. If you have a question, now is the time to type it in. Okay, we have another one. But so Mary was asking about COVID and Lyme disease, you know, these infections. I assume that those healing sessions are effective.
Well, COVID is a different thing than Lyme disease, but yes, Lyme, everything is a frequency, don't forget. So you can neutralize a frequency through intention. So you can do the Lyme disease from one of the session, the healing session that's on my website. But you can already start working on yourself. The problem is when you work on yourself, you don't know what you're looking at, and you have to go to the root cause of the problem, meaning not just, for example, let's say you have Lyme disease. So of course we want to neutralize, we want to alleviate the symptoms that you have right now. But unless you go back to the root cause, why did you attract the Lyme disease in the first place? You're going to say, yeah, because I was in a forest and whatever, and a deer or something, or a mosquito bit me or something. Yeah, that's the physical manifestation. But what is it in you on a subconscious level that made you go to that location and made you attract this one mosquito or what have you? Unless you go back to that reason, you're always going to be dealing with Band-Aids. And so that's the reason why the methodology that I teach, the Omnium method, helps you go back, identify the root cause of the issue so it never comes back again. So, but in your case, if you're struggling with Lyme, I would say do the one on blood cleansing, For COVID, it's a completely different thing because that's kind of a manufactured thing. It is a virus, but it's manipulated virus, meaning like it was originally a virus and then it kind of got added and mutated into something else. That's why it's harder to figure out when the body absorbs the COVID. It's not a natural virus. Like so it goes, oh, I know how to do a virus. That's not a problem. But because it has additional components, the body goes, wait, I don't know how to figure this one out. And that's why if you have a little bit of an immune deficiency, your body has a much harder time because it's kind of mixed with other information that wasn't supposed to be there.
Okay, so we have two more
Yeah,
questions.
take not a mosquito. You're right. That's what I meant. Doesn't matter. It still came from a little insect.
Do you think the reason the government has downplayed extraterrestrials is because they have discovered a natural form of energy that's free and that would replace oil? Is there a profit motive in covering up UFO alien encounters?
Of course, anytime there's a cover up, there's some sort of motive. I mean, obviously. And so this is another type of discussion, but there's no question. I think the governments have certain types of technology. They want to keep the control and they want to keep us dumb. They want to keep us, but I don't think honestly, I don't think it matters anymore because we're talking about what's happening in the world today, but I feel like we're at a different juncture right now. Now it's like chaos is erupting everywhere and we think it's the end of the world, which it kind of is the beginning of the end. But in a strange way, I think this is the beginning of the collapse of the world that is not working. Come on, let's face it. There's nothing, to me anyway, there's not one system on the planet that is working. Not government, not educational, not healthcare, not certainly not energy. Nothing. Society is not working. It is broken on all levels, especially financial as well. And so how do you create the new when you have this old paradigm existence, dominating your life? And so I feel like as we are going through all of this kind of chaos and this madness, to me, it serves to collapse the systems. And so how did we get on this conversation? What was the question?
The profit motive for
the profit.
Covering up UFOs.
Yeah, so you want to cover up stuff, that keeps this separation, this ability to control. And so, that's why I'm saying, yeah, I was saying all this. So my point is we're at a different juncture and we have to just hang on a little bit because as these things start to collapse, the truth is going to come up naturally, like spontaneously. It's going to unravel. And so all you have to do is just keep focusing on your truth and what you're here to do and what you're here to speak about, and not worry so much about, who's covering what, because it's too late anyway. And I think we have to stop waiting for the government to tell us, why are we waiting? We already know the truth. What are we waiting for? And not everybody in the government actually knows the whole story. We think that everybody in the government knows that it's a cover up. Well, some people do, other people don't. So even one guy comes out and tells us, have you guys seen The Phenomenon? My friend's film, James Fox, The Phenomenon. He had Senator Harry Reid, divulge pretty much the whole thing. Other people from the DOD. So they are divulged. They are telling us it's real and it's true. But guess what? The rest of the government is not saying it's true. So I think we're unrealistic to think that all of a sudden all branches of the government are going to come together and do some sort of disclosure, because they don't even know. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And so I think we just need we are the disclosure. We come out and tell our truth, tell our stories. And that's how eventually we're going to resurface while all of these chunks of reality are collapsing. It's hard right now, but I see that this is where it's going. And I see 2026, the beginning of free energy surfacing.
Oh, that's great. So Ruth Darlene wants to also know, speaking of stories, What was your not so good experience with the Greys?
Oh, we don't want to end on that.
You want to go into that?
Well, I will very briefly. I don't like to focus on it that much, so I'll shift my focus. I'm going to tell the story, and it's not going to affect me. But anyway, so it was at a time. I was in Atlanta at the time. I was sleeping, and all of a sudden, I felt a presence. So I looked to my left, and there's like 2 or 3, I don't remember, but there's like two guys, two little guys, and there was like some kind of weird energy coming at me, and so I remember having the reaction, oh, they're not gray, they're blue, because I realized that it's not their skin that we're looking at, it's a bodysuit. And then I looked at their eyes and I saw it's not their eyes. They're actually, it's a cover. It's like glasses. It's not glasses, but it's a cover. And I realized that the reason why they have this bodysuit in the eyes is because they cannot sustain themselves in the atmosphere here that much. So they have to kind of have this protective shield. But anyway, what they were doing is like they were bombarding me with very negative energy. There were beings on this side in this corner, like 10 of them, tall, like in ropes type thing. They were also bombarding horrible energy on my head. And then on the other side of the wall, there were a group of like reptilians. And again, basically, I was being bombarded with very negative energy, as if they were trying to make me sick and trying to break me down. And so my reaction, it was very difficult because I was like bombarded. So my reaction was, go away, I don't want it. I was like rejecting whatever they're bombarding me with. And so I kept kind of focusing on, leave me alone, try to put my bubble around me. So anyway, eventually they left. But then the next day I knew that something was wrong, like I wasn't feeling right. And so I actually started to have physical symptoms, like I lost a lot of weight, and like I was already skinny, but but anyway, so I was like not feeling quite right. And so I kept reversing whatever happened. I kept reversing and going into my cells and deleting what they did and reversing. And actually I then had, more beings kind of help me restore much faster, whatever damage they had done. So there you have it in a nutshell. Not very good experience.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to have this, our last question. So Hugh says eyesight can improve from the blindfold practice. Is there some kind of training that can improve hearing, physical hearing?
Yeah, that's another weird thing. I don't have experience in that, but the Russian group, the ones that are showcased, featured in my film, they showed me the video of a person, an Italian woman who had hearing loss, who couldn't hear. And then by doing this training, her hearing was restored. So I'm just telling you like a secondhand story. It's not my story. I saw the video and it was pretty incredible. But apparently, like I said, because the brain is trying to figure out all kinds of stuff. So I cannot say this will definitely help you. I'm just telling you that I heard this happens. Otherwise, I also believe, like I was saying, everything is information. Everything is information. So you have to go back to the root cause of the information that created the problem you currently have. And so even an ear thing. So sometimes, for example, I treat people who have phobia their whole life, and they do, hypnotherapy. They do all kinds of stuff for years and years, and it doesn't really work until we pinpoint the one event that happened. Sometimes it's in a past life. Sometimes it's even like before they were ever a human, because we keep going back in time. And so we notice that, until we find the first time that this block happened, and the block could be an experience that they had. For example, let's say it's a phobia of claustrophobic. Again, it keeps coming back. So we go back to a time eventually where they were on another planet or something, or they were trying to come to planet Earth, and then they got stuck in a port, like in a kind of a pocket of time space, and they were stuck there for thousands and thousands of years. And that triggered a feeling of being stuck, of not being able to breathe or to move or to live. And so unless we go back to something like this, which is not very easily discernible, their problem doesn't go away. And so, but when we do, instantaneously, whatever happens, whatever phobia they have now just dissolves. So,
Okay.
so all this to say, I don't know, I'm like telling you all this, but I think it's fascinating. But all this to say, even a hearing problem, even, you know, blindness or anything, even from birth, you can go back to say, well, why did I create this in this lifetime in the first place?
That's really fascinating. I did have a question. I don't want to ignore the YouTube people, the people listening on YouTube. And so there's one question coming in from YouTube about just sort of everyday practices that we can use to protect ourselves from negativity or, you know, attachments. Or
Yeah. So I call that energetic hygiene. Just like you take a shower, just like you brush your teeth, you know, just assume that if you've gone to Costco or anything or anywhere nowadays, honestly, you've picked up a few attachments or something is following you. I guarantee, because that's the way it is. It's you go out in the world, you get dirty, you have to come back, wash your hands, take a shower. It's exactly the same thing. You pick up stuff from people, even just saying hello to the neighbor. So assume that you've picked up a bunch of stuff. Every single morning, I recommend that you do what I call, that's why I created this specific meditation connecting to source, which is what Jerry briefly talked about. The frequency, it's a specific alignment, a specific frequency. You go to, it's on my website, it's free of charge. Go to the YouTube, it's free of charge. And on my website, it's free of charge. Do the connecting to source meditation with the intention of aligning your brain channels with that frequency, and also with the intention of flushing out, whether you feel it, you see it, you know it, don't worry about it. I guarantee there's something. Flush out the whatever energies that are interfering with your well-being on all levels, from the cells, from your energy field, from your entire being. And I made it so quick, so easy, 7 minutes. You think it's very simple, but it's all frequency. So it's doing a lot more than what it seems. So do that in the morning, connecting to source. My YouTube channel, again, I can show it to you, but just go to Caroline Cory, Omnium Universe on the YouTube. And then you will see, let me see, I'm opening it up for you. And you just do that one in the morning, and at night before going to sleep. It's only 7 minutes, with the intention to flush out whatever you picked up on that day, just like you brush your teeth, same thing. And so that's what I recommend you do. It's free of charge, and you know, it's just so easy. This is my YouTube channel, Omnium Universe. And this is right now, we have the trailer of the movie, but I don't know where connecting to source is. By the way, here also, there's all kinds of clearing sessions. There's all kinds of healing sessions, all free of charge. So I have about 200 videos, all free of charge. So please help yourself here. And one of these videos is connecting to, oh, here we go. Connecting to source. Here we go. Guided meditation. And it's only 7 minutes long. Okay. So please do that. Please, all of these meditations are very, very powerful. It's all reprogramming. Share them with your friends. It's all free. And these are all the talks and the interviews that I've done. But this is for clearings.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. It's been wonderful, wonderful talk, great answers, great questions. Thank you everyone for the questions. And if you haven't seen the film, go see it. If you have seen it, watch it again. I think there's just some really interesting work going on out there. And I'm so glad that you brought it to us in such a beautiful way. So again, your website is omniumuniverse.com or carolinecory.com. And I'm sorry, I keep calling you Caroline. It's Carolyn, right?
No, it's Caroline.
Yes, Caroline.
Yes.
Okay, I was right the first time. Or go to her YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone. Stay well. Jerry, do you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Just a couple of words with regard to what Caroline was talking about. In terms of clearing and getting rid of entities and anything else, that connecting with source is really the way to do it, or that's at least one good way to do it. And I've been learning some other things with regard to getting into the presence of the I am vibrational energy, which is what connecting to source does. So if you can, and we did some experiments in which you can, if you're at the I am or at this source vibration, things can't get to you, basically. And some experiments I was doing was that I was having other people try to put energies into my field, and they could do that. But as soon as I got to this higher frequency vibration, you basically have created a shield that it cannot go through. So that was very interesting. And I thought I'd mention one other thing. In the physical world, it's harder to move things around, but in the subtle energy world, it's a little easier thing to move around. And those who know biogeometry, they may not know that, but you can measure the energy of what's called BG3 with a pendulum. And you can actually move that energy around just consciously and then test where you've moved it. So it says that we're all very superhuman types of beings. We just don't realize that. And there are certain things that you can move around a little easier than others, and you can actually test for that. And people not understand that aspect of it. But I really want to say thank you to Caroline for bringing this message in, because I think it's trying to raise the consciousness of humanity, and her films are doing that. And I really, really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you again. I'm just like blown away, Jerry. Thank you so much for inviting me, and Judy as well. And I also wanted to say very, very briefly, I talked a lot, but all of these tools in the film is what we need right now, because it is such a mess. The only thing that we have left is our own mind, our own consciousness, because we can very easily be sucked into this reality and feel terrible and be confused as to what we need to do. And the tools that we talked about in the film, and just the film itself, kind of empowers you back, like, wait, I can control how I feel. And that's so important, because if you feel horrible, you're confused, you don't know what to do, you don't know what decisions to make, and you attract whatever illness or this and that. So empowering you to use your consciousness to stay in this alignment is what we need today. So that's why I feel like this is very, very timely. And I encourage everyone, if subscribe to my YouTube, so you get those notifications when we're doing live clearings and the free stuff. So hopefully this is going to be helpful as well. So thank you so much. I hope you guys liked it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here on your Friday night. Happy Halloween. Happy full moon. It's a very energetic time. So thank you for being here. Have a great weekend, and we'll see